My name is Daniel Reeves, and this happened 3 years ago when I decided to hike a remote Appalachian trail alone. I wasn't new to hiking. In fact, I preferred isolation. No noise, no people, just trees, wind, and the sound of my own footsteps. That's why I picked that specific trail. It wasn't popular, barely marked. Locals even warned me about it, but they didn't explain why. Just vague looks, like they knew something they didn't want to say out loud. The first few hours were normal, peaceful even. Tall trees stretched endlessly, blocking most of the sunlight, turning everything into this dim green twilight. My boots crunched softly against leaves, and the air smelled damp and old. But then I noticed something strange. No birds, no insects, nothing. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It felt wrong, like the forest was holding its breath. And that's when I heard it. A voice, very faint, calling my name. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me. You know how isolation can mess with your head. But then I heard it again. Daniel. Clearer this time. I froze. My heart started pounding instantly. There was no way someone else was out there. I hadn't passed a single person in hours, and the trail wasn't even visible on most maps. I turned around slowly, scanning the trees. Nothing. Just rows of silent trunks disappearing into darkness. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing awkwardly through the woods. No response. I tried to laugh it off. Maybe someone was messing with me. Maybe another hiker. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true, because the voice, it didn't come from one direction. It came from everywhere, above me, behind me, between the trees. And then, just as I started backing away, it whispered again, closer, right next to my ear. "Don't leave." I spun around so fast I nearly lost my footing. My breath came out in short, uneven bursts as I backed away from where I thought the voice had come from. My hand instinctively went to the small knife clipped to my backpack strap, not because I thought it would help, but because I needed something real to hold on to. "Who's there?" I said again, louder this time. My voice cracked, breaking whatever confidence I had left. The forest stayed silent. Too silent. Then I noticed something else. The trail. It didn't look the same anymore. I could have sworn the path behind me had curved slightly to the left earlier, but now it stretched straight into darkness. The trees felt closer, tighter, like they had shifted while I wasn't looking. I told myself to calm down. Panic makes you imagine things. That's what I believed, until I saw movement. Not far ahead, between two trees, something stepped back, like it didn't want to be seen. I stood there, frozen, staring at the spot where I had seen the movement. My eyes strained to make sense of the darkness between the trees, but whatever had been there was gone. Or maybe it was still there, just watching. I took a slow step forward, my boots crunching loudly in the dead silence. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn around and run, but something else, something heavier, kept pulling me deeper into the trail. Then I noticed footprints. Fresh ones. Right in the dirt ahead of me. They weren't mine. I crouched down, my hands shaking as I examined them. They looked human, but off, slightly longer. The toes too stretched, like whatever made them didn't walk the way we do. And then I realized something that made my stomach drop. The footprints weren't heading away from me. They were circling me, slowly, carefully, like something had been walking around me. This entire time, my chest tightened as I slowly stood up, my eyes locked on those unnatural footprints. They formed a loose circle around where I had been standing, like something had taken its time studying me, watching me, learning me. I stepped back carefully, placing my boots exactly where I remembered stepping before, trying not to disturb anything else. My breathing had grown louder now, too loud, like it didn't belong in that dead silence. "I'm leaving," I muttered under my breath, more to convince myself than anything else. I turned around and began walking back the way I came, At least, I thought it was the way I came. The trees all looked the same now. The trail seemed narrower, darker, unfamiliar. My sense of direction, something I had always trusted, was slipping away fast. And then I heard it again. Footsteps. Not mine. They matched my pace. Step for step. Just out of sync enough to make my skin crawl. When I stopped, they stopped too. I didn't want to turn around. Every instinct told me not to, but fear has a way of forcing you to face things you shouldn't. Slowly. Painfully slowly. I turned my head. Nothing. Just trees. Endless, identical trees stretching into darkness. But the feeling didn't go away. That heavy, suffocating awareness that something was there, just out of sight. I picked up my pace. My calm, controlled walk turned into something faster, uneven. Branches snapped under my boots, leaves scattered behind me. The footsteps followed. Closer this time. No longer trying to match me. They were gaining on me. I broke into a run. My backpack bounced violently against my shoulders as I pushed forward, my lungs burning, my vision narrowing. The forest blurred around me, branches scratching at my arms like they were trying to hold me back. And then the voice came again, right in front of me. "Daniel, you're going the wrong way." I stopped so suddenly my legs nearly gave out beneath me. The voice hadn't echoed this time. It hadn't drifted through the trees or whispered behind me. It had spoken directly in front of me. I stared ahead, my vision shaking, trying to focus through the dim green haze of the forest. For a few seconds there was nothing, just the narrow trail disappearing into darkness. Then I saw it. A figure, standing between the trees, perfectly still. At first it looked like a person, tall, thin, just standing there, watching me. But something about it was wrong. Its posture was unnatural, too straight, too rigid, like a mannequin trying to imitate life. "Hello?" I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. The figure didn't respond. It didn't move. But I realized something that made my blood run cold. It didn't have a face, just a smooth, shadowed surface, where features should have been. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt locked, like something invisible had wrapped around it and was slowly tightening. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body refused to listen. The figure tilted its head slightly. The movement was slow, deliberate, like it was studying me the same way I had been studying it. Then, without warning, it took a step forward. The sound of its foot hitting the ground echoed unnaturally loud, as if the forest itself was amplifying it. And then it spoke. Not from its face, because it didn't have one, but from everywhere at once. "Why are you leaving, Daniel?" Its voice sounded exactly like mine. Same tone, same pitch, same breath between words. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I turned and ran without thinking, crashing through branches, ignoring the trail completely. Because whatever that thing was, it wasn't just calling my name anymore. It was becoming me. I didn't care about the trail anymore. I didn't care about getting lost. All I cared about was putting as much distance as possible between me and that thing. Branches tore at my clothes as I forced my way through the forest, my breath ragged, my legs screaming in protest. I didn't stop. I couldn't. But no matter how far I ran, I kept hearing it, my own voice, calling my name, sometimes ahead of me, sometimes behind, sometimes so close it felt like it was inside my head. "Daniel, slow down. Daniel, you're tired. Daniel, just come back." I covered my ears, but it didn't help. The voice wasn't something I could block out. It was everywhere. And then, just when I thought my body would finally give out, I saw it. The trail, clear, open, leading out of the forest. Relief hit me so hard I almost collapsed. I stumbled toward it, not even questioning it, not even thinking. I just wanted out, so I stepped onto the path, and everything went silent. I don't remember how long it took me to get out after that. My memory blurs into fragments, running, falling, getting back up. But eventually, I made it. I reached the edge of the forest just as the sun was beginning to set, collapsing onto the dirt road like a man escaping a nightmare. For a long time, I told myself, that's all it was. A nightmare. Something my mind created under stress. But a week later, something happened that I still can't explain. I was home, safe, sitting alone in my apartment trying to move on, when my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. No text, just an audio file. My hands trembled as I played it. At first, there was nothing, just silence. Then I heard breathing, slow, controlled, and then my own voice whispered, "Daniel, you left me behind." I dropped the phone instantly, my heart racing, because I knew something. That thing never followed me out of the forest. I brought it with me. My name is Caleb Turner, and this happened 2 years ago when I took a temporary job as a fire lookout assistant in the Appalachian Mountains. I wasn't supposed to stay long, just 3 weeks, covering for a ranger who had taken sudden leave. That's what they told me. No details, just paperwork, a set of keys, and a warning that felt more like a joke than anything serious. "Stay on the marked paths," the supervisor had said. "And if you hear someone calling from the woods after dark, don't answer." At the time, I laughed it off. People love to exaggerate things about forests. The lookout tower itself stood on a high ridge, surrounded by endless waves of trees stretching as far as the eye could see. During the day, it was beautiful, peaceful, almost therapeutic. But at night, that place felt different. The wind didn't just blow, it whispered. And sometimes, when the darkness settled in completely, I could swear I heard footsteps circling the tower below. The first few nights, I told myself it was just animals, deer maybe, or something smaller moving through the underbrush. That's what made sense. That's what I needed to believe. But the sounds didn't behave like animals. They were too deliberate, too measured. Step, pause, step, like someone walking in circles. The third night was when things changed. I had just finished logging weather data when I heard it clearly for the first time. Boots. Heavy boots scraping against the gravel path below the tower. I froze, listening carefully. No one was supposed to be out there. Not this late, not this far out. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped onto the narrow balcony, shining the beam downward. For a moment, I saw nothing, just trees and shadows shifting in the wind. Then the light caught something, a figure, standing just beyond the tree line, wearing an old ranger uniform, completely still, watching me. I kept the flashlight trained on the figure, my hand tightening around it as if the beam itself could protect me. The man didn't move, not even slightly. "Hey," I called out, my voice echoing across the ridge. "You're not supposed to be out here." No response. The wind picked up, rustling the trees, but the figure remained perfectly still, unaffected by everything around it. Something about that bothered me more than anything else. Even from that distance, I could tell his uniform looked wrong, faded, torn in places, like it hadn't been worn in years. I adjusted the flashlight, narrowing the beam to focus better, and for a split second, he was closer. Not by much, just a few steps. But I hadn't seen him move. My stomach dropped. I blinked hard, thinking my eyes were playing tricks on me. But when I opened them again, he hadn't moved, or maybe I just hadn't seen it happen. A chill crept up my spine as I slowly stepped back from the railing. Every instinct told me to go inside, lock the door, and pretend I hadn't seen anything. But curiosity, or maybe something else, kept pulling me back. I glanced down again. The figure was gone, just like that. No movement, no sound, just empty darkness where he had been standing seconds ago. "Okay. Not funny," I muttered, trying to keep my voice steady. I scanned the tree line with the flashlight, moving the beam slowly from left to right. Shadows shifted, branches swayed, but there was no sign of him. Then I heard it, a sound that didn't belong. Creak. Soft at first, almost easy to miss. Then again, creak, this time louder. Right behind me. I turned slowly, my heart pounding in my ears, the wooden stairs leading up to the tower. They were moving, like someone was climbing them, one step at a time. I stood there, frozen, staring at the staircase as the sound continued. Creak. Another step. Slow. Heavy. Deliberate. Every part of me screamed to move, to shut the door, to lock it, but my body refused to respond. It felt like if I made even the slightest sound, whatever was climbing those stairs would know exactly where I was. The wooden structure groaned softly with each step, the entire tower reacting to the weight of something ascending toward me. "Hello?" I finally managed to whisper, my voice barely audible. The creaking stopped. Just like that. Silence fell again, but it was worse now, heavier, expectant. I swallowed hard and took a slow step toward the door leading to the stairs. My hand trembled as I reached for the handle. For a second I hesitated. Then I pulled it open. The narrow stairwell below was empty. No one there, but the steps. They were still shifting slightly, like something invisible had just finished climbing them. I slammed the door shut harder than I meant to, the sound echoing through the tower like a gunshot. My heart was racing so fast it felt like it might burst. There was no one there. No footsteps going back down. No movement. Nothing. But I knew what I heard. I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes locked on the door, half expecting the handle to turn on its own. Minutes passed. Maybe longer. Time felt distorted, stretched thin by fear. Eventually, I forced myself to move, checking the windows one by one, shining my flashlight into the surrounding forest. That's when I saw him again. The ranger, standing at the base of the tower, looking up at me, exactly where he had been before, like he had never climbed the stairs at all. My stomach twisted as a realization hit me. If he was down there, then what had just come up the stairs? I stumbled back from the window, my mind struggling to process what I had just seen. It didn't make sense. It couldn't make sense. The ranger was outside, standing perfectly still at the base of the tower staring up at me. But something had just climbed the stairs, something I had heard with my own ears. Slowly, I turned my head toward the door again. My throat felt dry, my breath shallow. I didn't want to look, but I had to. The handle moved, just slightly, a small, almost polite twist, like someone testing it. I froze completely. Then it happened again. The handle turned further this time, slowly, carefully, as if whatever was on the other side didn't want to scare me away. A soft knock followed. 3 taps, perfectly spaced. My heart dropped into my stomach, because a voice came through the door, low, calm, and unmistakably human. "Caleb, let me in." My knees nearly gave out when I heard my name. That wasn't possible. I hadn't told anyone where I was. No one should have been able to find me out there. And yet, it knew exactly who I was. "Caleb, it's cold out here," the voice said again, softer this time. I forced myself to look back toward the window. The ranger was still there, standing at the base of the tower, looking up, not moving, not speaking. Then the voice came again. From the door. "Why won't you help me?" It sounded wrong now, slightly distorted, like it was trying too hard to sound human, and failing. I backed away slowly, shaking my head. "No, no," I whispered under my breath. The knocking started again, faster this time, louder, not patient anymore, not calm. And then the handle jerked violently, like something on the other side had finally decided to come in. The door shook violently under the force of whatever was on the other side. The wood groaned, hinges rattling as if they were about to snap loose. I stumbled backward, my hand searching blindly for anything I could use to block it. "Caleb, open the door." The voice was louder now, angrier, no longer pretending to be calm. I grabbed a chair and shoved it under the handle, my movements clumsy and desperate. The knocking turned into pounding, heavy, relentless blows that echoed through the tower like thunder. But then, it stopped. Just like that. Silence. I stood there, frozen, my chest heaving as I stared at the door. Seconds passed, maybe longer. And then, a slow creak came from behind me. Not the door. The stairs. My blood ran cold as I turned toward them, because whatever had been outside the door, it wasn't there anymore. It had found another way in. I didn't wait to see it. I ran. I burst through the opposite door and rushed down the emergency ladder on the far side of the tower, my hand slipping against the cold metal as I descended too fast. I didn't care if I fell. I just needed to get away from whatever was inside. When my feet hit the ground, I turned instinctively and saw him, the ranger, still standing exactly where he had been before, looking up at the tower, not moving, not reacting, like he wasn't even aware of me. I backed away slowly, my mind unraveling, because I understood something then, something that still keeps me awake at night. That thing in the tower. It wasn't trying to get in, it was trying to get out. A week later, I quit the job, packed everything, left without looking back. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear boots on wooden stairs, climbing, closer, inside my own home. My name is Jordan Ellis, and this happened during what was supposed to be a simple weekend hike in the Appalachian region. I had done dozens of trails before, so I wasn't worried when I chose a less-known route recommended by a local forum. People described it as quiet and almost untouched, which sounded perfect to me at the time. I started early in the morning. The sky was still pale and the forest was covered in a soft mist that made everything look almost unreal. The trail was narrow but clearly visible at first, winding between thick trees and rocky patches. About an hour in, I checked my map. According to it, I should have passed a small fork in the trail already, but there was nothing, just endless forest and silence. My GPS showed a weak signal, flickering between accuracy and confusion. I thought maybe I had missed a turn. That's when I noticed something strange. My footprints behind me weren't alone anymore. I stopped walking immediately and turned around slowly, staring at the ground. My footprints were clear in the soft dirt, fresh, normal, exactly what I expected. But beside them, there was something else. Another set, matching mine perfectly. Same direction, same spacing, same rhythm, except they weren't made by me. I crouched down, trying to understand what I was seeing. The prints were almost human, but slightly off. The toes were too deep, like whoever made them pressed down harder than normal. And the edges of the prints looked dragged, like the feet had paused too long before lifting. I stood up fast, my heart starting to beat harder. I scanned the forest around me, expecting to see someone. Another hiker, maybe, messing with me. But there was no one. Only trees. And silence. Then I heard it. A soft crunch behind me, like someone stepping exactly where I had stepped moments ago. I didn't turn around immediately. I just froze, listening carefully, trying to convince myself that it was just the wind shifting through the trees, or maybe a loose branch falling somewhere behind me. But deep down, I already knew that wasn't true. The sound had been too precise, too intentional. Slowly, I began to step forward again, pretending I hadn't heard anything. My plan was simple. Move, stay calm, and get back to a point where I could figure things out. But the moment I lifted my foot, I heard it again. Crunch, right behind me, exactly mirroring my movement. My throat went dry as I forced myself to whisper, "Hello?" No answer. Only silence, followed by another step. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to look over my shoulder. The forest behind me looked normal at first, just thick trees and dim light filtering through fog. But then I noticed something that made my stomach twist. The distance between me and whatever was following wasn't changing. It was keeping pace perfectly. I started walking faster. At first, it was controlled, careful, measured steps. But the moment I increased my speed, the sound behind me adjusted instantly. Every step I took was matched perfectly. It didn't matter if I walked slow or fast. The presence behind me always stayed exactly synchronized. My breathing became uneven. I kept glancing back every few seconds, but I never saw anything solid. Just trees, shadows, fog shifting between trunks. Then something changed. The trail ahead wasn't the same anymore. I stopped abruptly, staring. The path that had been narrow and clear just moments ago was now wider, darker, and completely unfamiliar. The trees seemed to lean inward slightly, forming a tunnel-like shape that I didn't remember seeing before. I checked my GPS again. No signal. Not even a flicker. That's when I realized something worse. I wasn't just being followed. I wasn't even sure I was still on the same trail anymore. And behind me, the footsteps stopped. Completely. The sudden silence behind me was worse than the footsteps. It didn't feel like relief. It felt like waiting. Like whatever had been following me had decided to pause and watch what I would do next. I stood there, completely still, barely breathing, afraid that even the smallest movement would restart it. After what felt like a full minute, I slowly turned around. Nothing. Just empty forest. No movement, no sound. No footprints that I could clearly make out anymore because the fog had thickened slightly near the ground. It was like the forest had erased whatever had been there. I let out a shaky breath and tried to convince myself I had imagined it all. Stress, isolation, overthinking. My mind was trying to make sense of silence. But then I noticed something that made my chest tighten again. My footprints were still there, but now they weren't alone. They were joined by fresh ones again. But this time, they were facing toward me, as if whatever had been following me had turned around and was now walking back. My legs felt weak, but I forced myself to move again. I didn't care about direction anymore. I just needed distance. I started walking faster, scanning every angle of the forest, expecting something to appear at any moment. But the deeper I went, the less familiar everything became. The trees looked older now, taller, denser, almost like they had grown in overnight. I checked my GPS again. Still nothing. No signal at all. My map app just showed a blank gray screen like I was standing outside of reality itself. That's when I saw something hanging from a tree ahead. At first, I thought it was trash or maybe old climbing gear, but as I got closer, my stomach dropped. It was a backpack. My backpack. The same one I was wearing. I froze completely, my mind refusing to accept what I was seeing. I looked down at myself instantly. My backpack was still on my shoulders. Heavy. Real. So why was another one hanging there? And more importantly, how long had it been there? I didn't touch the backpack at first. I just stood there staring at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. My mind kept offering explanations. Maybe someone lost the same model. Maybe it was a coincidence, but none of them held up. The longer I looked at it, the more wrong it felt. It wasn't just similar. It was exact. Same scratches. Same worn strap. Even the small torn corner near the zipper looked identical. I finally forced myself to step closer. Each movement felt heavier, like the forest itself was resisting me. The wind had stopped completely again, leaving everything in that suffocating silence. When I reached out and touched the hanging backpack, it felt cold. Not normal cold, more like it had been sitting in shade for years. I slowly opened the front pocket. Inside was something that made my stomach drop instantly. A folded piece of paper. On it was my handwriting. But I didn't remember writing it. Not ever. Hands shook as I unfolded the paper. The ink was smudged slightly, like it had been exposed to moisture for a long time, but the words were still readable. Don't trust the trail. That was all it said. No explanation, no signature. Just that single sentence repeated twice underneath, each line slightly more distorted than the last. I stepped back immediately, dropping the paper as if it had burned me. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. That's when I heard footsteps again. Not behind me this time. Ahead. Slow. Deliberate. Approaching through the trees. I backed away instinctively, my eyes scanning the forest. The fog had grown thicker again, curling around the trunks like something alive. Then I saw it, a shape forming between the trees. Not fully visible, not fully hidden, just enough to make out that it was standing perfectly still, facing me. And then it spoke, not loudly, not urgently, just calmly. "You read it too late." I stumbled backward immediately, my foot catching on a root as I nearly fell. My eyes stayed locked on the figure between the trees, but every time I tried to focus on it directly, my vision seemed to blur, like my mind was refusing to fully process what I was seeing. The words, "You read it too late," kept echoing in my head, not like a memory, but like something still being spoken inside my ears. I turned to run, but the forest felt different now. The space between trees seemed tighter, the path less defined. I couldn't tell which direction I had come from anymore. Every way looked the same, endless trunks, thick fog, and that suffocating silence. Then I heard footsteps again, behind me, running now, fast, not walking, not matching, chasing. I pushed myself forward, branches whipping across my face, lungs burning as I ran blindly. I didn't look back. I was too afraid of confirming what I already knew. Whatever had been following me wasn't just observing anymore. It had decided I wasn't leaving. I don't know how long I ran. Minutes, hours. Time stopped making sense. The forest never changed. No matter how far I went, it felt like I was running in place, like the trees were repeating themselves in slightly different positions just to confuse me. Eventually, I collapsed near what looked like a clearing. My body gave out completely, lungs burning, vision spinning. I lay there, on the damp ground, trying to catch my breath, expecting something to appear any second. But nothing came. For a moment, there was only silence again, and then I heard my own voice, very close, whispering calmly, "You finally stopped running." I lifted my head slowly. Standing just a few feet away was me, or something that looked exactly like me. Same clothes, same backpack, same exhausted expression. But its eyes, they were wrong, too calm, too certain. It knelt down beside me and picked up the paper I had dropped earlier, and then it smiled slightly. "I'll finish the trail for you." I closed my eyes, and when I opened them again, I was gone. My name is Ethan Cole, and this happened during a solo photography trip deep in the Appalachian backcountry. I wasn't looking for anything supernatural. I just wanted untouched landscapes, old wooden structures, and that perfect golden hour forest light for my portfolio. I had been hiking for most of the day when I realized I was farther off the marked trail than I intended. My GPS was barely working, and the signal kept dropping in and out like something was interfering with it. Still, I wasn't worried. I'd camped off-grid before. I knew how to handle getting a little lost. It was around sunset when I first saw it. A cabin, tucked between thick trees, almost hidden completely from view. Old wood, slanted roof, moss crawling up the sides like it had been there for decades, but something about it didn't feel abandoned, because through one of the windows, I could see a light on. I stopped walking immediately. My first instinct wasn't fear, it was confusion. A cabin this deep in the forest, this far from any marked trail, shouldn't have had power, let alone light. I checked my surroundings carefully. No roads, no signs of recent human activity. Just trees, silence, and fading daylight. Still, the light inside the cabin stayed steady, warm, almost inviting. I told myself it was probably an old generator, maybe a ranger station, something logical, something normal. But the longer I stood there, the more wrong it felt. There was no smoke from a chimney, no sound of movement inside, no shadows passing the window. Just a single unmoving light, like it had been left on for someone who never came back. I raised my camera instinctively and zoomed in through the lens. That's when I saw it. A shape inside the cabin, sitting perfectly still at a table, facing the door, like it had been waiting for me. I lowered my camera slowly, my grip tightening around it without me even realizing. For a few seconds, I just stood there staring at the cabin, trying to convince myself I had misinterpreted what I saw. Maybe it was a reflection. Maybe it was just furniture shaped by shadows. But the longer I looked, the more certain I became. Something was inside, and it knew I was here. I took a cautious step forward, then another, my boots sinking slightly into the damp forest ground. The closer I got, the more details of the cabin became visible. Cracked wooden planks, a slightly crooked door, and that same warm light bleeding through the window like a silent invitation. Then I noticed something new. The front door was already slightly open, not wide. Just enough for a thin line of darkness to spill out from inside. I stopped walking immediately. I didn't remember seeing it open before. I was almost certain it hadn't been. And yet, now it was, like it had been waiting for me to get closer before revealing that detail. I didn't move for a long time. My instincts were screaming at me to turn around and leave, but something about the cabin held me in place. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It felt heavier than that, like a pressure in the air pushing me forward and pulling me back at the same time. I raised my camera again, but my hands were shaking too much to focus properly. The image through the lens kept blurring, shifting slightly every time I tried to steady it. That's when I heard it. A soft sound from inside the cabin, metal scraping against wood, slow, deliberate, like a chair being pushed back. I froze instantly, holding my breath. The forest behind me was completely silent now. Even the wind had stopped. Then I saw movement in the window again. The figure inside. It wasn't sitting anymore. It was standing. And this time, it was facing directly toward me. Even though I hadn't opened the door yet, I should have run. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to turn around and disappear into the trees, but my body didn't respond the way it should have. It felt like the cabin had anchored me in place, like stepping away from it required more effort than my mind could process. The figure inside the window didn't move again. It just stood there, perfectly still, as if it was waiting for me to decide what to do next. I forced myself to step back one pace, then another. My boots barely made sound on the soft forest ground, but each step felt unbearably loud in my head. That's when I noticed something worse. The light inside the cabin flickered, just once, a small, unnatural pulse. And in that brief flicker, I realized something that made my stomach drop. The figure wasn't just standing anymore. It was closer to the window than before, but I never saw it move. I stopped breathing completely, staring at the cabin as if it might explain itself. It didn't. It just waited in silence, warm light spilling out like nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong. I finally turned away from the cabin. It wasn't a decision. It was survival. My legs moved before my thoughts fully caught up, carrying me back into the forest without any clear direction. I didn't care where I was going anymore. Anywhere was better than staying near that place. But the silence followed me, not just behind me. Everywhere. Even the usual sounds of the forest, the insects, the wind through branches were gone. It felt like the entire area had gone dead the moment I turned my back on the cabin. I kept walking fast, occasionally breaking into a half run, trying to put distance between myself and whatever I had just seen. But something kept nagging at me. The feeling of being watched didn't fade. It grew stronger. After a few minutes, I stopped and looked over my shoulder. The trees behind me were dense and dark. But between them, far in the distance, I could still see it. The cabin. And the light inside it was still on, like it had never let me go. I kept walking, but no matter how far I went, the cabin never disappeared. It stayed in the distance between the trees, its warm light flickering softly like a heartbeat I couldn't escape. At some point, I realized I wasn't even sure I was moving away from it anymore. The forest had started to feel repetitive, like I was passing the same trees again and again in slightly different arrangements. My breathing became uneven. I stopped for a moment, placing my hands on my knees, trying to steady myself. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop completely. My footprints in the dirt were fresh again behind me, but I hadn't turned around. I slowly lifted my head and looked forward. The cabin was closer now, a lot closer. Close enough that I could see the glow reflecting faintly on the surrounding trees. Close enough that I could almost feel its warmth again, even from where I stood. And then I heard something I definitely didn't want to hear. A knock. 3 slow, patient knocks, coming from inside the cabin. I didn't move for a long time. I just stood there listening to the silence after the knocking. My mind was trying to make sense of it, trying to convince me there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe wind, maybe something inside the cabin shifting wood. But deep down, I already knew none of that was true. The knocking came again. But this time, it wasn't from inside. It was from behind me. Slow, deliberate. I turned around slowly, every muscle in my body tense, expecting nothing but trees. But there it was, the cabin, right behind me now. The same warm light, the same open door, the same silent invitation. It hadn't moved through the forest. It had waited for me to turn back. My throat went dry as I realized I had been walking in a circle without ever noticing. Or worse. The forest had been moving around me, and the cabin was always the center, waiting, patient. I backed away slowly, my eyes locked on the cabin that now sat directly in front of me, like it had been waiting the entire time. My mind was struggling to process it. I knew I had been walking away. I knew I had been trying to escape, but somehow I was back at the exact place I started. The door was still slightly open. The warm light still spilled out onto the forest floor, but now it felt less inviting and more like a trap that had already closed. I took one shaky step backward, and that's when I noticed something inside the cabin window again. The figure was there. But this time it wasn't standing. It was sitting at the table again, exactly like before, like nothing had ever changed, like I had never moved at all. Then slowly, it raised its head and looked directly at me, not through the window, but like it could see me standing right where I was, no matter where I moved. And then the light inside flickered one last time. I don't remember deciding to run. My body just did it. I turned and sprinted into the forest, branches hitting my face, roots catching my boots, lungs burning as I pushed forward without direction. I wasn't trying to escape anymore. I was just reacting. But the forest didn't feel like it was letting me go. Every direction looked the same. Every tree felt identical. And the worst part, I could still see the glow behind me even when I wasn't looking directly at it. Eventually, I collapsed against a tree, completely exhausted, unable to go any further. My vision blurred as I tried to catch my breath. That's when I heard it. A voice behind me, calm, close, familiar. "You came back." I turned my head slightly and saw the cabin door standing right beside me, not far away, not behind trees, right there, and inside the doorway. I saw myself sitting at the table, waiting, smiling, and this time, I didn't run. My name is Lucas Morgan, and this happened during a solo drive through the Appalachian backroads after my car broke down late at night. I was trying to reach the nearest town, but the GPS had stopped working completely, and my phone kept losing signal every few minutes. The deeper I went into the forested roads, the more isolated everything felt. No streetlights, no houses, just endless dark trees on both sides of the road. I had been driving for what felt like hours when I noticed something strange. My fuel gauge was dropping faster than it should have been. I knew I had enough fuel to reach town, but the needle kept falling anyway, like the car was burning it without reason. That's when I saw a road sign ahead, half broken and leaning sideways. It pointed toward a narrow dirt path with faded letters that I could barely read. River crossing, 2 miles. I hesitated. I didn't remember seeing any river on the map, but I had no other option. So I turned. The dirt path was worse than I expected. The road became uneven almost immediately, forcing me to slow down. Branches scratched against the sides of the car, and the deeper I went, the more it felt like I wasn't supposed to be there. My headlights struggled to cut through the darkness ahead. Everything beyond a few meters was swallowed completely by black forest. Then, after what felt like 20 minutes of slow driving, I saw it. A bridge. Old, wooden. Barely visible until I was almost right in front of it. It stretched across a river that I couldn't even hear at first, like the water itself was refusing to make noise. I stopped the car. Something about it felt wrong immediately. The bridge didn't look stable. The wood was dark, aged, and uneven. But what really unsettled me was the fact that it had no warning signs, no barriers, nothing indicating whether it was safe to cross, just the bridge, waiting in silence. And strangely, it looked freshly used. I kept the engine running, staring at the bridge, while my headlights washed over its uneven wooden planks. Something about it made my instincts scream at me not to move forward. It wasn't just old. It felt wrong in a way I couldn't properly explain, like it had been rebuilt too many times, or never fully finished in the first place. I checked my phone again. Still no signal. The GPS was frozen, showing my location as a blank stretch of nothing. Then I noticed something that made my grip tighten on the steering wheel. There were tire tracks on the bridge. Fresh ones, not faded, not old, recent. I slowly leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. The tracks weren't just going across the bridge, they stopped halfway, like something had crossed it, and never made it to the other side. I whispered to myself, trying to stay calm. Someone else has been here. But even as I said it, I didn't feel reassured, because I realized something worse. If someone had crossed recently, then why was there no sign of them on the road ahead? I decided to step out of the car. I don't know why. Maybe to prove to myself that nothing was actually wrong. But the moment I opened the door, the temperature outside felt noticeably colder. The air was heavy, still, almost unnatural. I walked slowly toward the edge of the bridge, my footsteps sounding too loud in the silence. The river below was barely visible through the fog, just a faint dark movement beneath the wooden structure. Then I heard something, a soft creak from the bridge. I froze instantly. I hadn't even stepped onto it yet. The sound came again. Creak, like wood shifting under weight. But there was no wind, no animals, no reason for it to move. I looked back at my car. Everything was still. Empty road behind me, swallowed by forest darkness. Then I looked forward again, and that's when I saw it. A small dent forming in one of the planks ahead of me, like something invisible had just stepped onto it. Right in front of me. I stepped back immediately, my heartbeat rising sharply as I stared at the wooden plank that had just dipped under invisible weight. My mind tried to explain it away. Maybe shifting wood, maybe an animal under the structure, but nothing about it felt natural. There was no sound of movement beneath the bridge, no splashing water, just that heavy, unnatural silence pressing in from every direction. I turned toward my car, thinking I should leave immediately. That was the only rational thought left in my head. But when I looked back at the road behind me, something felt different. The trees seemed closer than before, almost leaning in slightly toward the narrow dirt path like they were closing it off. Then the headlights flickered, just once. A brief sudden dimming that made my stomach tighten. When they stabilized again, I looked back at the bridge, and my breath caught in my throat. The dent on the plank was gone. But now there were two more, further ahead, like something was walking toward me, slowly, step by step, across the bridge. I don't remember deciding to run. I just did. My feet moved before my thoughts caught up, pulling me back toward the car as fast as I could go. I slammed the door shut behind me and locked it instantly, my hands shaking uncontrollably. For a moment, I just sat there, breathing hard, staring through the windshield at the bridge. Nothing moved. Nothing changed. It looked exactly the same as before, quiet and empty. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had just crossed it while I wasn't looking. I started the engine, ready to reverse and leave immediately. But when I shifted into gear, the car didn't move. I pressed the accelerator again. Nothing. The engine was running fine, but the wheels weren't responding. Then I noticed something in the headlights. A figure, standing at the far end of the bridge, completely still, watching me. And slowly, it raised one hand and pointed at my car. I stared at the figure at the end of the bridge, unable to fully process what I was seeing. My headlights didn't illuminate it clearly, almost as if the light refused to fully reach it. It stood in that strange border between visibility and shadow, not moving, not reacting, just pointing toward my car like it had already decided something about me. I tried honking, once, twice. The sound echoed loudly through the forest, but the figure didn't react at all. Instead, something worse happened. The bridge creaked again. Not under me this time, but closer. The sound was coming toward me, plank by plank, as if something invisible was walking steadily across the bridge in my direction. I could see slight depressions forming in the wood ahead, each one appearing a little closer to my car. My breathing turned shallow. I couldn't decide whether to reverse or stay still. Every instinct was breaking down into panic. Then my dashboard lights flickered violently, and in that split second of darkness inside the car, something tapped on my window, from the outside. I didn't look immediately. I couldn't. My entire body locked up, frozen between denial and terror. The tap came again, slightly harder this time. Tap, tap, slow, patient. Like whatever was outside knew I wasn't going to move easily. I forced myself to turn my head toward the window. At first, I saw nothing, just my reflection in the glass, pale, wide-eyed, barely recognizable. Then the reflection shifted slightly. Not me. Something behind me in the reflection, standing just outside the car door. But when I turned to look directly, there was nothing there. I snapped my gaze back to the mirror. The figure was still there. Closer now. Inside the reflection, it leaned slightly toward the glass, as if studying me through a world I wasn't fully part of anymore. And then it spoke. Not through sound, but directly in my head. "You crossed too early." My hands moved on instinct. I slammed the car into reverse again, ignoring the shaking, ignoring the tapping, ignoring the voice that now felt like it was crawling inside my skull. This time, the car responded, but wrong. Slowly. Too slowly. The tires finally rolled backward onto the dirt path, but the moment I started moving, the headlights flickered again. And in that flicker, I saw something that made my entire body go cold. The bridge wasn't behind me anymore. It was under me. I wasn't reversing away from it. I was still on it. The wooden planks stretched endlessly in both directions now, like the bridge had grown longer while I was looking away. The forest edges had disappeared completely, replaced by fog and dark water on both sides. I hit the brakes hard, breathing unevenly. That's when I noticed the figure again, closer now, standing right in front of the hood, no longer at the end of the bridge. It tilted its head slightly, like it was disappointed, and then it reached out toward the car. I don't remember opening the door. I don't remember stepping out. But I do remember the silence, absolute crushing silence that swallowed everything the moment I stopped fighting. The figure stood in front of me, now completely clear. Not human. Not entirely solid either. It looked like something shaped from the idea of a person rather than a real one. Edges too smooth, posture too perfect, presence too intentional. It didn't attack. It didn't rush. It just stood there, waiting. Then it spoke one last time. Not aloud, not in my head, but everywhere at once. "You belong to the crossing now. The next thing I remember is the bridge being empty again. My car was gone. The forest was gone. Even the river was gone. Only the wooden planks remained, stretching into darkness with no beginning and no end. Sometimes, late at night, people driving those back roads say they see headlights ahead of them on roads that shouldn't exist. And if they follow them, they never come back the same way, or at all. My name is Ryan Mitchell, and this happened during a solo hiking trip deep in the Appalachian wilderness where I was trying to document old, abandoned forest trails for a personal photography project. I had always been fascinated by forgotten paths, places where nature slowly erased human presence over time. The trail I chose wasn't listed on most maps. It was marked as inactive on a few old hiking forums, but people still occasionally talked about it, like it existed in a strange, uncertain way. That alone made me want to explore it. I started early in the morning with a full pack, GPS tracker, and enough supplies for 2 days. The first few hours were normal. Thick trees, uneven ground, and the steady sound of my boots against dirt and stone. Everything felt exactly like a typical Appalachian hike. But around midday, I noticed something unusual. A wooden trail marker. Except it wasn't like the others I had seen before. It was new, too new, and it had no direction on it, just a symbol I didn't recognize. I stopped walking immediately and studied the marker. It was clearly made of fresh wood, no rot, no weathering, no moss. That alone didn't make sense. Trails this deep in the forest didn't get maintenance. They were usually left to decay or disappear entirely. I took a photo of it for documentation, but my camera struggled to focus. Every time I tried to capture the symbol, the image came out slightly blurred, as if the camera refused to fully record it. I checked my GPS again. The signal was weaker than before, flickering between accuracy and complete loss. That's when I noticed something else. The marker wasn't pointing forward or backward along the trail like normal signs do. It was pointing sideways, into the trees. I hesitated for a moment, thinking maybe it was marking an old side path that had overgrown. That made the most logical sense. But when I stepped closer and looked into the direction it indicated, there was no path at all, just trees and something that felt like space that shouldn't be entered. I stood there for a while, staring into the direction the marker was pointing. The forest in front of me looked completely normal at first glance. Thick trees, uneven ground, and the usual undergrowth. But something about it felt staged, like it had been arranged rather than grown naturally. I checked my map again, zooming in and out, trying to find any indication of a side trail or intersection. There was nothing. Not even an old marking or faded line suggesting a path once existed there. Still, I found myself stepping closer, one step at a time. The air changed slightly as I entered that direction. It wasn't colder, but heavier, like the space itself was denser. My footsteps became quieter too, almost swallowed by the ground. I told myself I would just take a quick look and turn back. That's all. Just confirm there was nothing there and continue on the main trail. But the deeper I went, the more I started noticing subtle signs that something had been here before. Flattened grass, broken twigs, and faint impressions in the dirt, like something had passed through recently. After a few minutes of walking deeper into the trees, I stopped again. The sense of direction I had been relying on was starting to fade. Everything around me looked increasingly similar, as if the forest had shifted into a pattern rather than a natural layout. I turned back to retrace my steps. But something was wrong. The marker wasn't visible anymore. I should have been able to see it from where I stood, even partially through the trees. But there was nothing behind me except endless forest. I walked a few steps back, scanning carefully. Still nothing. That's when I felt it. A strange sensation, like I was being observed, not from behind or above, but from all directions at once. I froze, listening carefully. No wind, no birds, no insects, just silence so complete it felt artificial. Then I heard a soft sound ahead of me, a wooden tap, like something gently striking a post, once, then again, slow, deliberate, from deeper inside the forest, where there was no path. I didn't move for a moment. I just stood there, listening, trying to locate where the sound had come from. The forest had gone completely still again, like it was holding its breath. Even my own breathing felt too loud, too exposed in that unnatural silence. Then the tapping came again. Closer this time. Not behind me. Not beside me. Ahead. I slowly reached for my GPS, hoping it would give me some sense of direction, but the screen was almost useless now. Flickering, glitching, as if the forest itself was interfering with it. The coordinates kept shifting slightly, never settling on anything stable. I forced myself to take a step forward, then another. I told myself I was just investigating a sound. Nothing more. Just curiosity. But the deeper I went, the more the forest began to feel structured. The trees weren't randomly placed anymore. They were forming subtle lines, almost like borders, like I was entering something designed rather than natural. And then I saw it. Another trail marker. Exactly like the first one, but this time, it was already facing me. I stopped immediately when I saw it. My mind tried to reject what I was looking at, but there was no denying it. The same fresh wood, the same unfamiliar symbol, but now it was positioned differently, as if it had turned around to face my direction specifically. I took a cautious step back. The moment I did, I heard the tapping again. This time, it came from directly behind the marker, slow, precise, like something was knocking on the wood from the other side. I felt my stomach tighten. I knew I shouldn't move closer, but something about it pulled my attention forward anyway. I raised my camera instinctively, but the lens refused to focus again. The image kept distorting whenever I tried to capture the marker directly. Then the tapping stopped. Complete silence returned. And in that silence, I realized something that made my skin go cold. The marker wasn't pointing into the forest anymore. It was pointing at me, and whatever had been making the sound was now on my side of it. I stepped back slowly, my eyes locked on the marker, as if it might change again if I blinked. My instincts were screaming at me to turn around and leave, but my legs felt heavy, like the ground itself didn't want to let me go. The forest around me had become unnervingly still again, not even the faint rustle of leaves breaking the silence. Then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. My footprints behind me were disappearing, not fading naturally, not covered by wind or soil. They were just gone, like the forest was erasing my presence one step at a time. I turned quickly, scanning the path I had come from. There was no clear direction anymore. The trees looked identical in every direction, and even the light filtering through the canopy felt wrong. Too dim, too uniform. That's when I heard it again. The tapping. But now it wasn't coming from ahead or behind. It was coming from everywhere at once, surrounding me, encircling me slowly, like something was marking a boundary I had already stepped inside. I stopped moving completely. I didn't even breathe properly at that point, afraid that any sound I made might draw attention to whatever was out there. The tapping continued, slow and rhythmic, like it was circling me in a perfect loop. Then, right in front of me, the marker shifted slightly, not physically moving like something pushing it, but more like my perception of it changed. One moment, it was just wood in the ground, and the next it felt taller, more defined, almost like it had grown closer without actually moving. I backed away again, but this time there was nowhere clear to step. The forest behind me felt different now, compressed, like space itself had tightened. And then I saw something between the trees, a silhouette, standing still. Not fully visible, but clearly shaped like a person, holding something that looked like another marker. It didn't move, it didn't approach, it just stood there, watching. And then, for the first time, I realized the worst part. The marker wasn't leading me out of the forest. It was guiding me deeper into it. I made the mistake of looking directly at the silhouette. The moment I focused on it, the space around me felt like it shifted again. The trees didn't move, but my sense of direction completely collapsed. It was like the forest had rotated without physically changing anything. The tapping stopped. Complete silence followed immediately, and that silence felt worse than any sound I had heard before. I took a step back, but my foot landed somewhere that didn't feel like ground anymore. It was softer, uneven, almost like I had stepped off the trail entirely without realizing it. When I looked down, I saw something that made my chest tighten. Another marker, half buried in the dirt at my feet, and it was pointing upward. Not forward, not backward, up. I slowly raised my head, my breathing getting heavier. The trees above me looked normal at first, but then I noticed something between them. More markers. Hanging. Like they had always been there, waiting for me to look up. I don't remember deciding to leave the ground. I only remember reaching up without thinking, as if something inside me was responding to the markers instead of my own will. My fingers brushed against one of them, and the moment I touched it, everything went silent in a deeper way than before, like even the concept of sound had been removed. The forest below me was still there, but it felt distant now, like I was no longer fully part of it. The markers above swayed slightly, though there was no wind. Each one pointed in a different direction, but somehow they all felt correct at the same time. Then I heard my own voice behind me. Calm. Familiar. Good. You're learning. I turned slowly. The silhouette from earlier was gone. In its place stood another version of me, holding a marker, placing it carefully into the air like it belonged there. It didn't smile. It didn't need to, because by then, I understood. The trail wasn't being found, it was being built, and I was part of it now. My name is Mason Carter, and this happened during what was supposed to be my final solo hike through the Appalachian wilderness before I moved out of state. I had done similar trips before, so I wasn't expecting anything unusual. Just me, my gear, and a long trail I had studied carefully on multiple maps. The first few hours were normal. The forest was dense but familiar in a comforting way. Tall trees, soft ground, and that steady rhythm of footsteps that usually helps clear your mind. I even stopped once to take photos because the light filtering through the canopy looked perfect. But around midday, something subtle changed. The forest started feeling familiar in a way I couldn't explain. Not like I had been there before physically, but like I had remembered it. Certain trees looked oddly recognizable. Certain bends in the trail felt like I had already passed them, even though I was certain I hadn't. I checked my map to reassure myself, but that's when I noticed something strange. The trail name had changed. I stopped walking immediately and looked more closely at my map. At first, I thought it was just a glitch in the app or a syncing error, but the trail name wasn't just slightly different. It was completely unfamiliar, something I had never seen before, despite having researched this route for days. I zoomed out, then back in again. The layout of the forest matched my surroundings perfectly, but the labels didn't. It was as if the map was describing a place that only resembled where I actually was. I tried refreshing the GPS signal, but it only made things worse. The icon showing my location began to shift slightly, even though I wasn't moving. That's when I heard something behind me, a faint crunch of leaves. I turned quickly, expecting maybe another hiker or an animal, but there was nothing there, just still forest and long shadows stretching between the trees. Then I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. The path behind me looked freshly walked on, even though I hadn't turned around in over an hour. I stood still for a moment, staring at the trail behind me. The disturbed ground didn't look fresh in the normal sense. It looked replayed, like someone had walked the exact same steps I had taken, but slightly out of sync. The impressions were too precise, too aligned with my own movements. I told myself it was probably just coincidence. Maybe I had misread the ground earlier. Maybe I was just tired. But even as I tried to rationalize it, my instincts kept pushing back. Something about this didn't belong in the category of normal mistakes. I forced myself to continue walking forward, slowly at first, then at a steady pace. But the deeper I went, the more the forest began to feel familiar in a disturbing way. Not just visually familiar, emotionally familiar, like I had felt this exact moment before. Same trees, same angle of light, same silence. And then I saw something that made me stop completely. A small carving on a tree ahead of me. My initials, freshly carved, as if I had done it myself, recently. I touched the carving slowly, my fingers tracing the grooves in the bark. It wasn't old. The edges were sharp, the wood still slightly damp, as if it had been carved very recently. But I didn't remember doing it. Not even a vague memory of stopping here. I stepped back, trying to put distance between myself and the tree. That's when I noticed more markings nearby. Small scratches on other trees, symbols, arrows, all pointing in different directions, yet somehow forming a pattern I couldn't immediately understand. My breathing started to feel uneven. The forest wasn't just familiar anymore. It felt aware, like it was reacting to me noticing it. I checked my GPS again. The screen flickered, then briefly showed something that wasn't a map anymore. Just a single word. Mason. My full name appeared for half a second before the screen returned to normal. I dropped the device instantly, because now I knew this wasn't just a navigation issue. Something in the forest wasn't just tracking where I was. It knew exactly who I was. And worse, it was acting like it had known me for a long time. I picked up my pace after that, almost without thinking. My mind was trying to process what I had just seen, but the forest didn't give me space to think clearly. Every step forward felt heavier, like I was walking deeper into something that already knew I was coming. The silence around me had changed again. It wasn't empty anymore. It felt attentive, like the forest was waiting for me to react to something I hadn't fully understood yet. I looked around more carefully this time. That's when I noticed that the trees weren't as random as they should be. They felt arranged in a way that made subtle paths between them, even when no official trail existed, almost like the forest itself was forming direction. Then I heard something behind me. A voice. Not loud, not distant. Close enough that it felt like it came from my own thoughts at first. Mason. I froze instantly. It said my name again, but this time it didn't sound like an echo or a trick of the wind. It sounded calm, familiar, certain, like someone greeting me after already knowing me for a very long time. I turned slowly, expecting to see something behind me, but there was nothing. Just trees and shifting shadows. Still, the feeling of being watched didn't go away. In fact, it grew stronger the longer I stood still. I started walking again, but now I was paying attention to everything, every sound, every movement, every change in the environment. That's when I realized something disturbing. The forest wasn't just familiar anymore. It was consistent. Every time I passed a certain cluster of trees, I felt like I had passed it before. Not once. Multiple times. Each repetition felt slightly more precise, like the environment was refining itself around my presence. I stopped again and looked at my hands. There was dirt on them, but I didn't remember touching the ground recently. Then I noticed something worse. My footprints ahead of me weren't pointing forward anymore. They were facing back toward me, as if I had already turned around, even though I knew I hadn't. That's when I finally understood the truth. I wasn't walking through the forest. The forest was replaying me. I stopped walking completely after seeing the footprints. My mind refused to accept what I was looking at, but my instincts had already shifted into something colder, something quieter. It wasn't panic anymore. It was realization, building too fast to control. I slowly turned in place, scanning the forest around me. Everything looked normal at first glance, but now I couldn't trust normal anymore. The trees didn't feel random. The spacing between them felt deliberate, like I was inside a memory that had been reconstructed incorrectly. Then I saw it again. My initials on another tree. But this time, they were older looking, darker, as if they had been carved long before I arrived here. I walked toward it cautiously, touching the bark. The grooves were deeper now, more worn, like time had passed through them differently than the rest of the forest. That's when I heard something move behind me. Not footsteps this time. More like the sound of someone standing up slowly. I didn't turn immediately. I just stood there, listening to the silence that followed. Because now I knew something was behind me, and it had been there longer than I'd realized. I finally turned around slowly. There was no sudden jump scare, no rushing movement. Just the forest, quiet, still, and watching. But now I could feel it more clearly than before. The sense of something occupying the same space as me, even if I couldn't fully see it. And then I noticed something between the trees. A shape. Not fully formed. Not fully hidden. Standing in a way that mirrored my posture exactly. I stepped back instinctively, but the shape didn't move. It just stayed there, like it was waiting for me to understand what it was. Then it spoke, not loudly, not aggressively, calmly, familiar. "Mason, you always come back." My throat went dry instantly, because the voice didn't feel like it belonged to something else. It felt like it belonged to me, but older, repeated, echoed too many times. The forest around me shifted slightly again. Not visually, but perceptually, like the moment was looping back into itself. And I realized something that made my chest tighten completely. This wasn't the first time I had heard that voice. I took another step back, but the forest didn't respond the way it should have. Instead of increasing distance, it felt like the space between me and the figure was compressing. The trees behind me no longer felt like behind. They felt like another version of the same moment, slightly out of sync. My breathing got heavier, but even that started to feel strange, like it didn't fully belong to me anymore. The figure between the trees finally moved, just one step forward. That was all. And in that single step, I understood what it was. It wasn't chasing me. It wasn't copying me. It was repeating me. Every hesitation, every decision, every step I had taken in this forest. It was happening again, just slightly ahead of me, like the forest had stored me and was replaying me in real time. I looked down at my hands again. The dirt was gone. My pack felt different, heavier, older. Then I heard my own voice behind me again, but this time it wasn't calm. It was remembering. I turned slowly one last time, and this time I didn't see a monster. I didn't see a threat. I saw myself, not just a reflection, not just a silhouette. Me, standing exactly where I had stood at the beginning of the trail, holding my gear, looking forward into the forest like I was about to start the hike all over again. But I wasn't at the start anymore. I was watching it happen again. The forest around me was no longer random. It was structured like a memory replaying on loop, resetting each time I reached the end. Every tree, every sound, every step. It was all part of something that refused to let me leave as a new person. The final version of me in the distance took a step forward into the trail, and I realized the truth completely. The forest doesn't lose people. It keeps them. And when you leave, you don't actually leave. You just become part of the next version of the story.